What's up and welcome to Guiding Bolt. Jessica here, and today we're learning about the Random Orbital Sander. Now, in front of me here I have the ROS 20 VSC model, but most Random Orbital Sanders work fairly similar to one another. Now, what I like about the Random Orbit Sander is that it's a really easy tool to use for someone who might be new to using power tools or new to using power sanders. It's a little bit more forgiving in the terms that it's less likely to leave marks in your surface compared to other sanders like perhaps a belt sander. So how the Random Orbital Sander works is that it has a pad on the bottom here, and this disc here, it rotates in a circle as it operates, but then the disc itself also oscillates randomly, thus the name. You'll see here also that there are holes on the bottom here, and when you're sanding, the device actually sucks up the dust particles and brings them back into this dust canister in the back here. As you are sanding, you do want to make sure that you are constantly emptying this cartridge out because you want good airflow to make sure that you're pulling up those particles and you don't want this to get clogged up. If possible, I do recommend hooking up a shop vac in place of the dust canister. Now this model here, it does have a speed setting here, so you can adjust the speed depending on what you are doing. Typically, a lower speed is used when you're using a when you're using a lower grit, such as an 80 to strip something off. And as you're getting closer to your finishing grit, like a 220, you're going to be on a higher setting, like 5 or 6. So this particular sander, it does have two grip options. The first one here is up on top, and then the second option is from the side. So what this allows you to do is hold the tool in a way that is comfortable to you, but it also gives you the option to switch back and forth if you're sanding a larger project to help prevent your hand from cramping up. So this type of orbital sander has what's called a hook and loop pad setting. So what that means is that the sanding pads basically attach with Velcro, and they just pull off like that. And when you're applying a new pad, you want to make sure that you're lining up the holes so that they're not blocked. Another important note is when you are, working with the dust canister, replacing your sanding pad, make sure your device is unplugged so that there's no chance that you might accidentally bump the on switch. When you're working on a project, you're going to want to have a variety of different grits of sandpaper. The lower the grit number, the rougher the surface of the sandpaper, the more material it's going to take off your surface faster. The higher you get, the smoother the paper is. So you can see on the back of this package kind of a rough guide. Your stripping papers are typically in the 40 to 80 range, your smoothing are in the 100 to 150 range, while your finishing grits are 180 up to 320. For the project that I'm working on next, which is going to be refinishing this table you see in the background here, I am starting with a 120, moving to a 180, and finishing with the 220. And I'm not doing the starting step of working with the 80 because I'm going to use chemicals to strip off the old finish. The other thing you want to make sure when using sandpapers is that you want to work your way up in the grits. You don't want to start with an 80 and jump all the way to the 220 because your surface isn't going to be properly smoothed and prepped for the next stage of, finishing with a stain. Before you sand your surface, you do want to make sure that it's clean of any dust or particles before you sand, because anything that's on the surface could get caught up in the sander and then create grooves or swirl marks on your surface. So before you start, make sure you wipe it down really well with a cloth or a rag beforehand. When it comes to turning the rotary sander on and off, remember, start on, stop off. So when you go to turn it on, have it flat on your surface, turn it on. When you're ready to stop it, lift it off, and then shut it off. And remember, you're going to move very slowly across your piece. Moving too fast can cause swirl marks. Once you start sanding, you want to keep the device moving across the surface. You do not want to hold it in one position, but you also don't want to move it too fast across the surface. The kind of standard rule is about 1 inch per second. So yes, if you're sanding a larger surface, like a table, it is going to take some time, so please have patience. Your sanding can make all the difference in the final outcome of your project. As you're sanding, you want to go back and forth across the length of your piece, going with the grain, and each pass you make should slightly overlap with the previous pass you did. This will help hide any marks or swirls that potentially are left behind by the motion of the orbital sander. When you're sanding along the edges of your piece, you want to make sure that the device isn't hanging too far over the edge. A rough rule is maybe have at least 2/3 or so of the device still over the top of your piece so that you don't actually accidentally tip the device. As you're sanding, you want to always keep the sander flat to the surface. You never want to tilt or tip it on its edge because that will create grooves or swirls in the piece. If you're sanding and you notice that you're creating pigtail swirls, you need to stop and reassess what is happening. Pigtail swirls can happen for a number of different reasons. You might be sanding at a speed that is too slow. You might have debris caught in the sander, if your surface wasn't cleaned properly, or if you're using inexpensive sandpaper, it's possible that a piece of grit has broken off and has gotten caught up and is leaving grooves now. So make sure you're using good quality sandpaper. As I've mentioned before, you also don't want to move too fast when you're sanding because that can create swirl marks. And you also want to let the sander do the work. You don't want to apply too much pressure. Really, your hand should be resting on the device enough to hold it, but you shouldn't be having downward pressure. That disc needs the freedom to spin and randomly orbit itself. Otherwise, that can also create swirls and groove marks. Finally, don't forget your safety equipment. When you're working with a power sander, I recommend wearing safety glasses and then a dust mask or a respirator with a particle filter. One trick to help you sand evenly across the surface of your piece of wood is to take a pencil and to lightly draw a line across the surface. And what this will allow you to do is make sure that you are sanding away the pencil line, but doing that across the entire surface so you have a smooth, even sand. And if then you need to go back again, you can draw another pencil line and then sand off another layer. Now, if you're sanding and you notice that you're kind of clearing all of the pencil mark around a spot and a single spot of pencil mark is staying put, that means you have a low point in your board. And you don't want to sit and hold your sander there until you get that single spot in the center to go away. Again, you're going to want to trace your pencil across the whole surface and go across the whole thing and continue to do that until you also get that center spot. That does it for today's video. I hope you guys feel more confident about using your random orbital sander now. If you have any questions, please go ahead and drop them down below in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you back here next week.